You are on the What I Never Saw channel. Enjoy watching.
I remember the exact shade of red. Not just red. Loud, synthetic, almost aggressive. The kind you see on lipstick ads or plastic discount signs in DR* stores. That kind of artificial red that demands attention, even when you're trying to look away. It was an earring. A single one. Glossy plastic with a chipped gold base and a dull metal stem that had seen better days. It lay there on the floor, halfway between the dresser and the foot of the bed, like it wanted to be found. Like it was planted. The thing is, Brooke never wore earrings like that. We'd been married nearly 8 years by then, together for 10, and I could spot her jewelry blindfolded. She was minimal, tasteful. Tiny studs, sometimes a single chain. Occasionally her mother's hand-me-down sapphire set if we were going somewhere nice. But never costume jewelry. Never something that looked like it came in a $5 pack from a gas station spinner rack. So I just stood there staring at it, not even touching it at first. My suitcase still in the hallway, the room unervingly still. The bed was made perfectly tucked. No impression on the pillows. The blinds were halfway open, letting in the late afternoon light, and the window was wide open like someone had tried to air out the space. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. Felt staged. I reached down and picked up the earring between 2 fingers. It was light, but it felt heavy in my hand. I stared at it like it was going to blink at me, like it might confess something. I turned it over once, twice. Then I just stood there, and I waited. About 5 minutes later, I heard the front door click open and the unmistakable rustle of a pharmacy bag. Brooke's footsteps, light but quick, padded toward the bedroom. She came in carrying a white plastic bag with the pharmacy's teal logo on it. Her hair up in a loose bun, cheeks a little flushed. She stopped short when she saw me, and saw what I was holding. Her eyes, blue-gray, sharp when they needed to be, flicked from the earring to my face. And then she smiled. Too fast. Too practiced. Not a trace of surprise in it. "Oh," she said, breezy as a summer day. "That must have been from girls' night. I think Megan wore those." "Yeah, definitely Megan. She had these giant red earrings, remember?" I didn't answer. I just kept holding the thing, still turning it in my fingers. She set the pharmacy bag down on the dresser like nothing had happened. "We were in here doing makeup, maybe it fell off then." She always loses stuff. It wasn't the first time Brooke had deflected something. She was good at it, always had been. A fast thinker, even faster talker. She had a way of making you feel silly for asking a question in the first place. Like the doubt wasn't just unfounded, it was rude. She reached over and took the earring from me, chuckling like it really was no big deal. "I'll text her and ask, but I'm sure it's hers." That smile again. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But a few things didn't sit right. First, Megan had moved to Seattle a month ago. She wasn't even in town, let alone at our place last weekend. I knew that because we sent her off with brunch and champagne and teary hugs. There had been no girls' night. No one had come over. And second, Brooke never left our bedroom window open. She said the dust messed with her allergies. Still, I didn't say any of that out loud. I just nodded once and walked into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, let it run longer than I needed. That's the thing about suspicion, it doesn't explode. It seeps. It creeps in through the cracks, curling around your thoughts like smoke under a door. You start replaying things you'd already moved on from. You start asking yourself if you really remember something right. And most of all, you start listening, really listening, to the tone people use when they lie to you gently. Brooke had told small lies before. White ones. "I'll be home in 10, when it was more like 30. "I'm not mad," when she clearly was. But this was different. It wasn't just the lie. It was how fast she told it. How polished it sounded. Like a cover story she'd practiced in the mirror. I stepped out of the bathroom a minute later. She was already out of the room, humming some tune in the kitchen, the earring nowhere in sight. The window was still open. The breeze was blowing in. And our bed, still perfect, looked like a showroom piece. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay next to her, listening to the rhythm of her breathing and wondering if it had changed. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how many other things I had missed. She reached for me once, casually, resting her hand on my chest, and I flinched. Not enough for her to notice, I think. But I noticed, and that's when it started. The rewinding, the mental note-taking, the soft click of a lock inside my brain sliding shut. The earring wasn't proof, not yet. But it was enough to change something. It was the first time in our entire marriage that I looked at Brooke and thought, I don't know what you're hiding, but you're hiding something. I didn't accuse her. I didn't interrogate her. I just stopped believing her. From that moment on, everything she said came with a second voice in my head, whispering, is that true? Or, what else is she not saying? People think betrayal is loud, that it comes crashing through the front door with angry text messages and lipstick on collars. But that's not how it started for me. For me, it started with an earring no one claimed, a smile that didn't match her eyes, and a window that should have been closed. After the earring, everything changed. It's hard to explain how quickly a single object can reframe your whole life, but that's exactly what it did. I started seeing things I had already seen, but through a different lens. I didn't become paranoid. I became attentive, hyper-aware, like a detective who just got handed his first real clue and suddenly remembered every conversation that didn't sit right. The shift was subtle, even to me. At first, I told myself it was nothing, that maybe I had forgotten Megan was visiting, that maybe Brooke just mixed up the timeline. But a part of me, the part that never fully turned off, wouldn't let it go. And that's when I started to remember. Not the big stuff, the little stuff, the stuff you'd never think twice about unless you had a reason to. Like how she'd started going to yoga again, which on its face sounded great. I encouraged it even, but I couldn't help noticing she always came home after those sessions without so much as a bead of sweat on her forehead. Her yoga mat looked brand new, untouched. Her water bottle, full. Her hair always down. And her phone? Silent. Face down. Great class, she'd say, dropping her bag by the door. How was it? I'd ask. She'd shrug. Relaxing. Then disappear upstairs for a shower she didn't seem to need. Started there. And once you start noticing one thing, you start noticing everything. She started closing her laptop when I walked into the room. Not slamming it shut, that would have been obvious. But just enough to break my line of sight. Or she'd tilt the screen away. Her explanations were always casual. Just work emails? Or nothing exciting. Sometimes she'd smile and toss a "privacy, please" at me with a wink. I never thought I'd become someone who peeked over his wife's shoulder. But I didn't have to. The energy changed. She had become a closed book, one I used to be able to read cover to cover. There were new wine glasses too. That sounds stupid, I know. But we'd had the same mismatched set since our wedding. 2 were chipped. 1 had a cloudy spot from the dishwasher. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we had 4 perfectly polished, expensive-looking glasses sitting neatly in the cabinet. I asked her where they came from. She laughed and said, Target. They had a sale. But there were no receipts, no bags. And later that night, I checked our joint card statement. Nothing from Target. No charges at all that week. I started to pay closer attention after that. Not to catch her, not yet, but because I wanted to know what was real. Her perfume changed. That hit harder than I expected. Brooke had worn the same scent for years. Something soft and floral, barely there. She said anything stronger gave her headaches. Then suddenly, she started wearing something bold. Musky, sharp, the kind of perfume that lingers in a room long after someone's left. First, I asked about it. You like it? She said, turning in place like a model showing off a new dress. It's something new. Just wanted a change. That part was true. Everything else wasn't. Because the perfume wasn't hers. It wasn't for her. It was for someone else. She started wearing it on Thursday nights. That was the other thing, Thursdays. For months, Thursday had become her work dinner night. Once or twice, sure, that's believable. But every Thursday, and always with vague descriptions, we're entertaining clients or new product rollout team. Not once did she invite me. Not once did she mention names. And the few times I offered to meet her afterward, just a drink, a nightcap, She had an excuse ready. It'll run late. It's mostly managers. You'd be bored. Maybe. Or maybe I'd see something she didn't want me to. But still, I didn't say anything. I just observed. Quietly. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from pretending everything is fine. You eat dinner together, talk about work, maybe binge a Netflix show. You laugh, maybe even touch. But you feel the wall. You feel it in the silence between conversations. In the seconds it takes her to answer a question. In the way she used to reach for your hand in the car but doesn't anymore. She stopped touching me, like I was too familiar to need it. That realization almost broke me. You think the end comes with yelling, tears, a suitcase by the door. But sometimes, it's in the little things. Like when she walks by and doesn't brush your shoulder anymore. Or when she leaves the house without saying goodbye. She still smiled at me, but it felt rehearsed, mechanical, like customer service. And when she kissed me, it was on the cheek. Not the mouth. Not anymore. I told myself I was overthinking. That marriage goes through seasons. That maybe we'd just fallen out of sync and needed a vacation. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe she was tired. But I knew better. Because the Brooke I married was spontaneous, affectionate, clumsy with her emotions but sincere. She used to burn toast every Saturday morning trying to surprise me with breakfast. She used to sit in my lap when I was trying to work. She used to cry at dog commercials. But the Brooke I was living with now, she was polished, distant, strategic, and cold. I started to document things quietly, not like a spy, just notes. Times, dates, things she said. I'd write them in the Notes app on my phone and delete them the next day, even though I already had them memorized. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining this, that my instincts weren't some leftover insecurity. And every Thursday night, I stayed home and sat with the silence. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't ask who she was with. I just waited. Once, she came home laughing into her phone, quickly ending the call when she saw me on the couch. "Oh, hey," she said. "Didn't think you'd still be up. Didn't think you'd still be out," I replied. She kissed my cheek, told me she was tired, and vanished upstairs. She never mentioned the call. And I never asked. Because I didn't need to. The thing no one tells you about this stage, the in-between, is that it's worse than the betrayal itself. When you know something's off, but you don't have the proof. When every hug feels like a lie and every smile feels like a goodbye she hasn't said yet. I still loved her. That was the worst part. And I hated myself for loving someone I couldn't trust anymore. But I also knew one thing. I wasn't going to confront her until I had certainty. Until I saw it with my own eyes. Until then, I watched. I remembered. I waited. Because sometimes, silence is sharper than any question. And when the truth finally comes, you don't want to be the one caught off guard. I didn't sleep the night I decided to follow her. The thing about doubt is it grows legs. And mine had been walking around our house for weeks, pacing behind me, tapping me on the shoulder when I tried to focus on anything else. Couldn't relax. Couldn't breathe without hearing that internal voice whispering, I needed to end it. Not the marriage, not yet. Just the guessing. It was a Thursday, of course. Her so-called work dinner night. She wore a black coat I hadn't seen before. Not expensive, but stylish. Her hair curled softly at the ends. A deep Berg *NDY lipstick that didn't match her usual aesthetic. She passed through the hallway like she didn't notice I was watching her. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she thought I wouldn't dare question her anymore. "I'll be late," she said, grabbing her phone and sliding it into her purse. "Charity dinner with a couple donors. Might go for drinks after." I nodded from the kitchen. "Where at?" She didn't pause. "Downtown. That new place near the theater. I'll send you the name later." She didn't. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and left. That was her new routine, leaving breadcrumbs that led nowhere. Promises of follow-ups that never came. Names she forgot to give me. Details always a little too vague to pin down. But that night I didn't stay behind. I waited 3 minutes after she pulled out of the driveway. Then I grabbed my coat, locked the door, and followed. I knew her routes, knew her habits. She didn't suspect anything because I had never given her a reason to. She thought I was too trusting, or too slow to piece it together. But the thing is, I've always been good at staying quiet when I need to. I drove with my lights off until I was a few blocks behind. Kept my distance. Took side streets when I had to. I felt ridiculous. Like some budget private investigator. But the adrenaline pushed everything else out of my head. My hands were sweating. My pulse was louder than the tires. But I stayed on her. I watched as she bypassed downtown entirely. She didn't take the exit toward the restaurant district. She didn't veer left toward her office either. She kept driving north. Out of the city. That was the moment I knew. And yet, even then, even with the road signs pointing away from everything she told me, some part of me still hoped I was wrong. Hoped there was some charitable gala hidden in the woods. Some elegant estate dinner I'd never heard of. But that part of me died the second I saw the lake. There's a small cottage community tucked just beyond a wooded ridge about 40 minutes from town. People rent them for weekends. Short getaways. The kind of place where no one asks questions because no one stays long enough to care. She turned into one of the gravel paths, kicking up dust as she pulled into the narrow driveway of a tan, two-story cabin with white trim. I parked at a lookout point just up the hill, behind a cluster of trees, and K** led the engine. The car was hidden, but I had a clear view of the balcony. First, nothing happened. The porch light flicked on. A minute later, a man stepped outside. I didn't know him. He was tall, athletic build, maybe mid-30s, same as Brooke, wearing a dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He leaned against the railing like he owned the place. Comfortable. Waiting. Then she appeared. Brooke walked out with a glass in her hand, laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. Her body language was loose, relaxed, like she'd been unzipped from the version of herself she showed me at home. He moved closer. She let him. He touched her back, then pulled her in like it was second nature. Like this was a ritual. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. They kissed. I didn't breathe, couldn't. That kiss, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't like a scene from a movie. It was slow, familiar, something worn in by repetition. She rested her forehead against his when they broke apart. Then she said something I couldn't hear and laughed again. Softer this time. She looked peaceful, content, like she belonged there, like she didn't even remember me. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking. I zoomed in and hit record. I didn't need to film long. 10 seconds. That's all it took. The image was crystal clear. Her face, his face, the closeness, the touch, the glass in her hand, the private moment she thought no one would ever see. It was all right there. That's what I wanted, not to humiliate her, not to explode, just confirmation. Something undeniable. Something that could never be twisted into a misunderstanding or just a friend. Something she couldn't talk her way out of. I stayed for maybe 5 more minutes, just watching, not them, her, trying to reconcile the woman I saw in front of me with the woman I had spent nearly a decade loving. And I couldn't do it. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was distance. A cold, spreading distance between who I thought she was and who she had become. It was like watching a movie and realizing halfway through that the lead character had been someone else entirely. Eventually, I drove home. I didn't text her. Didn't call. When she got in later that night, she came in quietly. I heard her kick off her shoes, turn off the hallway light, and creep upstairs. She thought I was asleep. I was wide awake, lying in the dark with the phone still in my hand. I didn't ask her anything in the morning. I didn't say a word. She made coffee, scrolled through her emails, acted like everything was business as usual. And I let her, because now I knew. I had something better than confrontation. I had the truth, and the truth didn't need to shout. It just needed to sit there, steady and immovable, while the rest of the story crumbled. I watched her pour her coffee, stir in the cream, tap the spoon twice on the side of the cup, the same way she always had. It was eerie how normal she looked, how completely she could pretend. But now I saw everything. I saw the cracks in the act, the flicker of nerves in her eyes when I held her gaze too long, the the sudden interest in asking how my day was, as if she remembered how people in love were supposed to talk. She had stepped out of our life long before I stepped out of denial. But I wasn't going to let her know I knew. Not yet, because the moment you speak it aloud, the game changes. And I wanted to move first. I didn't pack that morning. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled when people talked to me. I even had lunch with a coworker I barely tolerated. From the outside, I was just another guy in khakis, sipping black coffee and muttering about deadlines. But inside, I was planning my exit. I'd seen enough the night before to confirm every gut instinct, every late-night suspicion, every moment of doubt I had dismissed over the past few months. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't want drama. I didn't want to hear her cry, lie, or try to shape the story into something more palatable. I already knew the truth, and the truth didn't need closure. So I did what most people wouldn't. I disappeared cleanly, quietly, without a scene. That night, I sat across the dinner table from Brooke, listening to her talk about work. She went on about a new initiative, some consulting project, something that required more Thursday night dinners. She stirred her pasta absently, glass of red wine at her side, hair pinned back like always. I stared at her and wondered, how many nights had she sat across from me with someone else's mouth still on hers? She didn't notice anything different. I was calm, too calm, detached. I nodded where I needed to. I smiled when it made sense. I offered a dry joke that made her laugh. It would be the last time she ever heard me joke. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed up. I moved slowly, deliberately. I took a single suitcase from the back of the closet. Not the big one, just the carry-on we used for weekend trips. I opened my drawers and chose only what I needed. 2 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, warm socks, a hooded sweatshirt, a weatherproof jacket. Essentials only. I didn't touch my work clothes. Didn't need them anymore. I left my watch, my razor, my cologne. All gifts from her, all tainted. Then I went downstairs and logged into our bank account. We had 1 shared account and 2 personal ones. I'd set them up that way early in the marriage for flexibility. She liked having her own space, and I never questioned it. Now I saw how foolish that had been. I transferred exactly half of the shared savings into my personal account, not out of spite but out of fairness. I left a paper trail. No surprises, just a clean cut. Then I opened the automatic payment dashboard and began the second phase. I disabled every auto payment that supported her, streaming subscriptions, utilities tied to her email, even her gym membership. The one she claimed she was using more lately. I left the mortgage alone. That would take time to disentangle. But everything else? Gone. No more Netflix. No more Uber charges to my card. No more ghost expenses. I logged out and printed a single sheet. The confirmation of the bank transfer. I folded it neatly and slid it under the edge of her mirror upstairs, right where she'd see it in the morning. Then I walked downstairs again and placed my house key on the kitchen table. Dead center. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. That key had been on my key ring for nearly a decade. The metal was worn smooth from use. I remembered the day she gave it to me. How she made a big deal out of handing it over, calling it the most romantic thing she'd ever done. Now, it looked like any other piece of metal. Before I left, I looked around the house one last time. The living room where we'd opened wedding gifts. The kitchen where we danced barefoot to old records. The staircase where I once proposed during a snowstorm because I couldn't wait one more day. Gone. Not physically, but emotionally. All of it had been erased the moment she kissed another man and laughed like I never existed. At 2:14 a.m., I pulled out of the driveway. I didn't look back. I drove north, past the city limits, past the suburbs, into the darker stretches of highway where the trees swallowed the moonlight and the road seemed to disappear under my tires. I kept the radio off. I didn't need sound. I had silence, thick, welcome, healing silence. My destination was simple. A cabin in northern Wisconsin. An old hunting place that belonged to my friend Daniel's family. He offered it to me once when I told him I needed a break. I'd laughed it off then. Said I couldn't imagine being away from Brooke for a whole week. Now, I couldn't imagine being near her for one more second. The cabin sat at the edge of a frozen lake, wrapped in pine trees and fog. No internet, no cell reception, a fireplace, a creaky porch, a mattress hard enough to hurt. Exactly what I needed. I arrived just after dawn, my eyes burning from the drive. I let myself in, lit a fire, and slept for 16 hours straight. No one called. No one texted. No one knew I was gone. Not yet. That was the point. I didn't want to disappear to punish her. I disappeared to free myself. To step away from the performance I'd been giving for months. The husband role I'd been cast in without a script. In that cabin, I remembered how to sit still, how to breathe deeply, how to eat when I was hungry and sleep when I was tired. I chopped wood. I read books I'd forgotten I owned. I listened to the crackle of logs and the way the snow whispered against the windows. Days passed. A week. Still no word. I didn't turn my phone on. I didn't need to. Brooke would figure it out eventually. The money, the key, the silence. Maybe she'd panic. Maybe she'd pretend to be confused. Maybe she'd tell her friends I was going through something, or that we were taking space. But the truth was simpler. I left, not in anger, not in fear, but in absolute, grounded, unshakable clarity. She broke something she couldn't fix. She crossed a line I could never uncross. And once I knew, really knew, there was nothing to say, nothing to discuss, no performance to stage, just the final act of a marriage that had been over long before I walked out the door. I stayed gone. No texts, no calls. I didn't even turn on my phone for the first 2 weeks. When I finally did, I expected a flood, dozens of missed calls, voicemails, frantic texts. But there weren't nearly as many as I thought there'd be. Just 6 messages from Brooke, all spaced out and increasingly hollow. 1, where are you? 1, can we talk? A couple more that just said, please. And then nothing. No voicemails. No tearful apologies. No driving up to the cabin to track me down. It was like she realized I knew, or worse, didn't care if I did. Maybe she thought it was just temporary, that I'd come back when I cooled off, that I'd swallow my pride like I always had and slot myself back into the role she'd hollowed out for me. She didn't know this version of me, the one who wasn't interested in closure, explanations, or repairing something that was already ash and bone. But Savannah did. My sister had known something was off for months. She'd said as much one night when we were out for drinks, maybe 6 weeks before the earring. She didn't accuse, didn't lecture, just asked, gently, are you happy? At the time, I'd deflected, laughed, said something stupid like, it's marriage, not summer camp. But she knew. Sisters always do. So when I finally turned my phone back on and saw her name light up with a message, call me when you're ready. I know. I didn't hesitate. I stepped out onto the icy porch of the cabin, dialed her number, and told her everything. All of it. The earring, the lies, the lake house, the video, the disappearance. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just went quiet. The kind of quiet you only get from people who are already halfway down the road of disbelief and just needed confirmation. She listened, and then she asked just one question. What do you want to do? I didn't know. I still don't know if I really wanted anything. I wasn't out for revenge. I wasn't hoping to ruin Brooke's life or torch her reputation. I just wanted to be done. With her. With the pretending. With the weight of all of it. But Savannah wasn't like me. She didn't grow up letting betrayal sit untouched in the back of her chest. She acted. Not publicly. Not with a megaphone or a Facebook rant. She was smarter than that. More surgical. She posted anonymously on a private women's forum she moderated. Something between a support group and a small-town gossip mill for people who had once been burned and didn't know how to let the matchbox go. She laid out the story in pieces. No names. Just events. Timelines. Timestamps. Places that were just specific enough for people to start squinting at the edges. A red earring. Thursday nights. A cottage near Lake Arrow Bay. A man with a gray Audi who didn't work in finance. The comments exploded. At first, people sympathized. Then they guessed. Then they connected dots. One woman recognized the yoga studio. Another mentioned Brooke's perfume had started showing up on someone else's clothes. Someone else recognized the cottage, said her cousin's boyfriend used to rent it. It snowballed faster than I ever expected. I stayed out of it. I didn't post, didn't reply, just watched from a distance as the web she'd woven started to tear at the seams. Brooke didn't say anything for the first few days. Then, on the 6th day, she went dark. All of her social media vanished. Every account, gone, deleted, like she was trying to scrub herself from the internet before the whispers turned into shouts. I got a message from an old friend of hers, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, asking, "Is everything okay with Brooke?" The tone was too careful, too performative. I knew it wasn't about concern. It was curiosity dressed up in faux sympathy. I didn't respond. I didn't owe explanations to people who had watched her drift away from me in real time and said nothing. People who saw the cracks and complimented the paint she'd slapped over them. One by one, the curated images of her life started to unravel. The wellness posts, the inspirational quotes, the flawless selfies with the perfect lighting. All gone. What remained was silence, and not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that grows teeth. What I didn't expect, what truly caught me off guard, was the shift in how people treated me. Quiet texts, hesitant apologies. People I hadn't heard from in months suddenly asking how I was doing, pretending like they hadn't noticed she stopped wearing her ring, that she started showing up to events alone, that she looked at other men like she was scouting for a new life. They noticed. They just didn't care until now. But Savannah? She cared. Not because she wanted drama, but because she hated seeing her brother reduced to a ghost in his own marriage. She wanted to pull back the curtain, even if I didn't have the stomach for it. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask her to slow down. I just watched, and for the first time in months I didn't feel crazy. That was the gift she gave me, not revenge but validation. Proof that I hadn't been imagining it. That the small deaths I'd been feeling every Thursday night weren't just in my head. Brooke didn't call. She didn't send flowers. No letter, no drive-up apology, no tearful message begging me to talk. She just folded in on herself, like a house of cards someone finally breathed too close to. Maybe she thought silence would protect her. But my silence had weight. It didn't need shouting or screaming. It just sat there, heavy, unmoved, unbothered, while the consequences of her choices closed in. And in that silence, something inside me started to settle. Not forgiveness, but freedom. I didn't need to make a scene. Her world was collapsing all by itself,